Job with the football players.
Just now. All right. Good morning, everybody. This is your boy D Mac, man. So let's talk about it. All right. Last night, so I called out a key to lead because the topic that we're going to talk about this morning is taking the responsibility of being a role model out of the hands of athletes and bringing it back to the real men. Because a lot of the athletes that we've seen over time, you know, when we relinquish this responsibility to these people, it started off pretty good. And, the athletes was doing a pretty good job of being a role model and stuff like that. But then you saw every now and then you would have some irregularities. You had Pete Rose. He went out and he blew it with the whole little gambling thing. And that started to just bring a decline to the whole hero mindset in athletes. And then you go a little bit further and you would see a situation like Ray Rice take place and him hitting a female. Then you had Big Ben to have his issues up there in Pittsburgh. And then you go down to Carolina and you have what was the guy's name? Uh, Ray Caruth. Ray Caruth was one of the worst, and I believe Ray Caruth, his crime that he committed, which was murdering the mother of his child so that he wouldn't be caught up in child support and having to deal with this child that he went out and made with this woman. Well, the young lady, she died and the child still lived, but he was deprived of a chance to have a normal life because of the actions of his father. And so Ray Caruth is still in prison. The young man did survive, and he is, I believe, 18 or 19 years old to this day. And he deals with a lot of issues because of, like I said, the actions of his father. And at that point, that is when I was ready to take the responsibility of being a role model out of the hands of athletes because I saw the athletes were starting to get away from the responsibility that was given to them. And so it's not of any fault of their own because the leagues that they're in have this requirement and these guidelines for them to keep this squeaky clean image because they're a representation of whatever team or organization that they're getting paid from. And so I understand that. And so me personally, I never really trusted any athlete who didn't have a little bit of dirt on them. How they will have those star athletes that they want to keep that squeaky clean image so that they can use that brand and just run with it and just do anything with it, such as your Michael Jordans. Michael Jordan always had that squeaky clean image all the way up until his retirement. Then things started to come out about him. Same thing with Kobe Bryant. Rest in peace, Mamba. But you had that squeaky clean image all the way up until that little story leaked out about Colorado. Then we have LeBron James right now. He's the representation of that squeaky clean image. And you really can't find any dirt on LeBron James. The only thing that we've heard about LeBron James came from Cappy Pondexter, and a lot of people will make a claim that Cappy has lost her mind and Cappy is crazy and she's going through all of this and that. But we know that in a lot of these stories that people are saying, uh, there could absolutely be some truth in that stream. But who are we to judge? But at the same time, I feel like we are at fault because at some point we stopped being the hero to our children, and we allowed our children to be influenced by these athletes who are dropping the ball at every go now. And so we have to take back this responsibility from these athletes because they've shown that they just want to do their own thing now. And like I said, it's no fault of their own because the league that they're in is causing these guys to be under the pressure. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They want to live their own life. They want to have their own personalities and things like that. And I understand that. They don't want to be controlled by this industry anymore and feel like they're obligated to be our kids' heroes. And that started around the time I respect um, Charles Barkley for the commercial that he did. Hey, I'm not a role model. Got you, Charles. Understand 100%. You're not a role model. You don't want that responsibility on you. And so we going to take it off your hands. Good morning, crazy cousin. How you doing, my brother? And so, Charles, yeah, we going to take that smooth off your hand because the men's tribunal will come together, man. And we've decided that we going to let you athletes off the hook, man. Y'all no longer have to worry about that responsibility because I know with my children, the way that I raise my children, my sons, my daughters, uh, their very first hero is going to be dad. You know, they may admire other people in sports and in TV and whatever else lane that they're interested in, but their first superhero is going to be pops until they get to an age to where they really understand that we are human and we have our own inadequacies and shortcomings. I'm that superhero to them. I know everything. I can do everything. And this is just the image that's in the mind of a child when looking at a parent. This is what it should be. And most times is whenever you're active in their life. And so the very first superhero and the very first hero that my children had was me. And I would take that and I would guide that. Now, I'm not saying that I would try to make myself my everything in my kids' life because I understand at some point they're going to have other influences outside of me. But in the early stages of their life, that's my job to put forth an image that my kids can admire and that my kids can aspire to be like, and it would be something good that would take them on to the areas that they need to go to so that they can be successful in whatever endeavors they choose to take later on down the road in their life. Follow what I'm saying? And so yeah, when you look at a story like Ray Caruth, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna go through this a little bit because this is a very interesting and terrible situation that took place. Ray Caruth he was a very promising wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers. It was at the time when the Panthers just came out, they were still an expansion team because it was Carolina Panthers and the Jacksonville Jaguars came out at the same time. Two brand new expansion teams and fairly young. Ray Caruth was an up and coming wide receiver for the Panthers. He was doing great things, about to get that big bag. Well, he was dating this young lady and they happened to have a child. Well, the lady was pregnant. She let him know. He felt like she was going to try to take him to the cleaners. Now, I don't know how much he was expecting her to be able to get for child support from her, but he didn't want to deal with this lady none whatsoever. And so the right idea that this young man came up with was to hire a hitman to take this lady out so that he would be disconnected from the situation and not have to deal with it anymore. Well, he paid the hitman. The hitman went to do the job. And for all intents and purposes, he was successful. But the young lady had enough power and enough wherewithal in her when she was shot. She made a phone call. And she let the authorities know that it was the father of her children who had this done before she closed her eyes and took her last breath. And so we saw the trial. We saw this dude try to hide in the trunk of a car and get out of town. And that's where they found Ray Caruth, in the trunk of a car. They picked this dude up and then they had the trial, and it was something crazy. And it was one of the biggest embarrassments, not only to black men, not only the men in general, but just as a human being, it was an embarrassment to see somebody stoop this low just because they didn't want to be a father. And that's why I singled out this dude right here, because he is a poor representation of what a man and a father is supposed to be. And this is one of the main reasons why we have to take the responsibility out of the hands of these athletes for being an influence in our child's life. A lot of these guys, they don't even know what it is to be a man. I stated this before. Let's state my reaction to my mentors in the male universe. You say, damn, why don't I remember this Ray Caruth story? Hey man, go look it up, man. This is back, like I said, this is back in the beginning when the Carolina Panthers was still an expansion team, like the early '90s and stuff. But it was a real big story, man. Because I'm from North Carolina, I was a big Panthers fan, still a big Panthers fan, and so this is one of those stories that was just all over the news in Charlotte. You every day that the trial was going, everybody was glued to the TV in the Carolinas because it was so crazy. And like I said, this man has destroyed the image of what a father is supposed to be. And that's why I single him out of all of the athletes, because we can go through many, many stories about athletes who dropped the ball. So Aqib Talib, this is the main focal point of the story as well, but I wanted to tie Ray Caruth in there to just lay the foundation of what I'm talking about this morning. And Aqib Talib, brother, I don't know what your background is as far as the male influences in your life, but for you to be out there and you and your brother, first and foremost, why do he have a gun at a little league football game is the most important question out of all of this. And then two, there's a lot of analysts who right now who are taking this story and they're going back into the days of Aqib Talib in the NFL, and they're starting to pull up his old resume now. Now they're starting to see like, oh, well, he got into trouble with this right here, and he got into trouble. Well, we don't know what that kid's background was. There are so many of these kids who come into the league who don't have any type of male guidance. They've had coaches that kept them out of trouble long enough to produce what they needed them to produce for their program, but that was it. And then whenever they moved along to the next level, they were, hey, this kid got a few issues, you got to work with him. So really, that's the only type of restraint and guidance that these guys had, was a coach who had an invested interest in their athletic ability, and so they would try to keep them out of trouble. But once you get to the league and once you get that certain amount of money and certain amount of freedom under your belt, you have to take ownership of your actions and the type of influence that you are out here in this world. And so every single year, whenever they have the combines and stuff like that, you always hear the story, man, this kid has all the talent in the world, but he just have these outside issues that he's dealing with. And that's those kids who never had a father to guide them and say, hey, son, this is the route that you need to go. Hey, son, don't do this, don't do that. And I appreciate the Pivot Podcast. Shout out to everybody on the Pivot Podcast, because these are the things that they bring to light. And they just had a father and son duo on this show to discuss this type of thing. The difference between having your father there and who's been in the league and who can give you these tips before you move on to the next level. You said you watched the Aqib Talib interview last night where he said he was raised by his mother only in Dallas. She said moved him around about 8 times from 99 to 2004 when he graduated high school. Fatherless. See? There you go right there, man. And that's the whole point that this whole story is about, man. We have a lot of these young men out here who were fatherless, but they had all of this talent, all of this promise. And, you know, mama could only do so much to keep them out of trouble until they moved on to that next level. And each level that they went to, man, they just kind of got passed around like that troubled kid. Keep him out of trouble. He'll get you this many yards. He'll get you this many catches, and so forth and so on. And so Aqib Talib was one of those young men. And, you know, when you have family siblings that are younger than you that look up to you, they're going to follow in your footsteps. So I remember because one of my best friends, his brother played in the league. He played for the San Diego Chargers in the 90s. His name was Natron Means. And whenever he went out to California from Harrisburg, North Carolina, he wanted somebody there with him that was going to have his back. So he took his older brother, Adrian. Shout out to Nate and Adrian, man. And this kept him grounded because he grew up without a father, but he did have strong male figures in his life to, hey, young buck, yeah, we see you out there on the gridiron doing your thing, but check this out. This is what men do. This is how men walk. So when you go into these things, he always had some men from the neighborhood, from the community, to pull him aside and just start imparting that in him because they seen where he was headed. And he was smart enough to take that knowledge and keep himself out of certain issues. And, you know, all of these years later, that brother never had any issues. You never heard no real crazy stories coming out about Natron Means. Only thing you heard about him was there was one time where his manager or whatever stole a lot of money from a whole lot of different players in the NFL. That's the only thing that you heard about this brother. So I salute him for being one of those brothers who held it down and was a good influence, although he didn't have a father in his life, but he held close to those positive influences who did take the time to impart something in him because they seen where he was going. So shout out for that, man. But Aqib Talib, brother, I don't know what your mindset was. I don't know what your intent was, but what you showed to those young men out there on that football field that day, what you showed to the parents, and now there's a young man who's absent his father. And when he look at the NFL and when he look at football players, who knows what's going to go through this child's mind? You destroyed his image of a hero. You destroyed his image of a positive, strong black man, and you destroyed his image of somebody being successful and coming back to give to the neighborhood and give to the community. You destroyed that image for this young man. Because I'm pretty sure everybody around your little area had a certain level of respect for, even if not for the person or the man that you are, they had a respect for what you accomplished and what you brought to their area for them to be proud of, to say that this is somebody that came from our area. But now all of that's been destroyed by your actions, brother. And so there's so many more like you that we're going to have to protect our children from, because we're not in the age no more to where people respect the rules and the guidelines that's been set before them. And so now it's time for the men to take that responsibility back from the athletes. No knock on y'all. Y'all continue to do y'all thing. If you choose to be upright and you choose to want to portray yourself in an image that's positive to the children, cool. You're just adding on to what us men are doing. But us as fathers, us as men out here, we need to take that mentorship role back from these athletes. That's not their responsibility. First and foremost, we are going to be that first hero in the lives of these children locally. I did a show not even a month ago where I was talking about the importance of the local hero even more than the worldwide hero that everybody sees. It's important for our children to see men in the community active, doing things that they can see with their own eyes and they can experience, so that they can have an idea of how to carry yourself out here. Because I guarantee you, the little league coaches out here, I was a little league coach in North Carolina for a few years whenever my oldest son started playing football. And so I'd already been volunteering because that's what me and my cohort did. The group of friends and family members that I grew up around. We played at the Boys and Girls Club. We went to whatever level in high school and or college or however far we went, but we always came back and gave back to the Boys and Girls Club. Shout out to the Boys and Girls Club in North Carolina, where my homeboy Breesy is still holding it down to this day. Rodney Mason, shout out to you, bro. And so we had this in us. This wasn't something that somebody told us we had to do. This was just something in us that we did. And so, you know, that's where it starts. These kids come out here, they have fun, they have these dreams and aspirations of becoming the next whoever. And we as coaches out here, we're on that forefront. We're the ones who begin to see what their character flaws are, not just what their athletic ability is, but what are the character flaws? Do they get mad real easy? Do they get frustrated real easy? Do they need a little extra motivation? Do they need somebody just to talk to outside of that because they have stuff going on off the field that's affecting their psyche whenever they come out there to play? Because I recognize everything in each one of my players. The whole time that we had practice, I was out there and I was doing everything. I was very active with these kids because it was more than just me teaching them football. I was teaching them life lessons. I was teaching them how to persevere, how to push through things. I was teaching them how to be able to stop and cry if you needed to stop and cry, because sometimes it's necessary. They always had this macho bravado thing that they would push on kids. Suck it up and drive home. Be a man and don't cry. No, 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 no. That's not what we're doing. If you have something going on and you need to release and let that out, young man, you go over there and sit on that bench and you take care of what you got to take care of. Good morning, real cornbread. Salute to you, my brother. And so we instilled these things in these young men. We gave them an opportunity to exercise some things that they probably wouldn't be able to exercise at home. You know, and then they would go up there and they'd be in the building and they would be able to socialize and all of these different things that probably would be missing in their household. So it's very important for that local hero to be there when these kids starting out in life so that they can have a positive image of what it is to be a positive and productive citizen, not even just an athlete. Athlete is that secondhand. Student athletes, man. That's another thing. When we was in school, you know, on high school level, we had those kids in middle school and elementary that was looking up to us like we were some guys going to the NFL and things like that. That's how big high school football is in some areas. I don't know if y'all know anything about North Carolina. And now I'm in Texas, and it's crazy that North Carolina and Texas, when it comes to high school football, we're basically at that same level. The energy is so crazy. It's just like a night at an NFL game. And so these kids look up to high school players the same way that they look up to college players, the same way that they look up to NFL players. But it starts at your manhood. It starts at the things that you do off of the field as well, because they're not just looking at your stats on the field. These kids see you around the neighborhood. They see you over there hollering at that girl. They see you at the local eating spots and stuff like that. So your actions, when you was out and about, then you had a responsibility. And like I said, I tip my hat to the guys like Natron and all of them who came up before us, because a lot of the kids in our group didn't have no dads. We didn't see what it was like to be a man. But through those men in the neighborhood and in the community who invested in Natron and those guys, they brought that back home to us, the young ones, the little wild loose cannons out there, and they'll snatch us up by our collar. Hey, boy, nah, that ain't what we do. Hey, little boy, what you think you doing? Get in the house. You know what I'm saying? No matter what they was doing, if they was doing dirt, no matter what they was doing, get your little young self in the house. This ain't for you. This ain't where you supposed to be. And so we had that guidance, but we, in the age that we're in now, we absolutely do not have that type of guidance in the neighborhood. For one, the dudes, the older dudes who supposed to be the OGs and keep us in line, they out here trying to be young like the young boys. They don't want to let go of that youth title, and they don't want to accept the role of being OG. But some of y'all are old as dirt, and you know you need to sit down somewhere and let these little young boys do their thing. And that's another problem that we have that I've been discussing with some of my friends, is the fact that cats my age, which is 45, 40 and up and stuff like that, out here running around trying to be like these little kids. And running around trying to be like these little kids, you can't impart no type of wisdom in them, because a kid knows. A kid knows who's real. He recognizes authority. Even if he don't have it steadily throughout his life, whenever he see a man in a role of authority, he is going to recognize that authority, and he's going to straighten up. No matter how tough he claimed to be, this is the desire of any child who don't have that structure in their life and in their family. And when somebody comes forth and they exercise that authority in that child's life, at first it's alien to them, so they don't know how to react to it, but they know that it's something that they need. They know that it's something that they respect. I've dealt with children. Whenever I got out of the military in 2012, I went right into a position of being a mentor for young boys from the ages of 13 to 17 at a therapeutic boarding school up here in Cameron, Texas. And the main line that always came with these kids was the fact that they didn't have any structure in their life. And so whenever you introduced it to them, they initially kicked back. But as you continue to shape them and mold them and work with them young men respected that, because it was consistent. It was something consistent in their life, and it was something that they could count on. And us as mentors, us as a staff, it was our job to show these guys that you can be strong and you can be consistent in these areas and move forth in life. And that's what the whole program was about. And a lot of these guys, I stopped doing that in about 2015. I did it for 3 years, from 2012 to 2015. And still to this day right now, I still have some of those young men who graduated from that program who will call me up. Hey, they call me Mac. Hey, Mac, what's up, man? I'm doing this in my life. Hey, Mac, man, I met this great girl, man. We're about to settle down and I'm going to get married, man. Hey, Mac, man. And they just giving me, just highlights of what's been going on in their life, because they proud of where they are, because they knew where they were headed. I'm proud of where they are because I saw where they was heading. And they always look back and they just give me little updates of what's going on in their life, man. And these dudes are going on to become productive members of society, as to where they was going down the road to where they was going to be a menace to society. And shout out to every one of you kids who went through Resolution Ranch in Cameron, Texas, man. Shout out. I'm proud of every one of you. And I tell people all the time when they ask me how many kids I have, I say, well, I have 5 daughters, and I have an unlimited amount of sons out there who's running around in Texas and whatever other state, because we had kids come from different states to this program as well. And so I know what it means to introduce structure into the life of a child. I know the difference that it makes whenever a kid has something consistent in their life that they can count on and that they can fall back on and that they can draw from. And that's why I say we are taking the responsibility from these athletes and we're putting it back into the hands of these local heroes. These brothers who are out here who are taking their time out of their lives to impart something in somebody else's child. Because it's a domino effect. If you don't take care of that child, if you don't take interest in that child and stop and just give him a moment of your time, that could be the difference in him going somewhere to commit a crime and you just talked him out of it. Very well could be the scenario. I've seen it many times before. Had not you said something to me in that moment, I would have went and done this because I was on my way to go do that. I've heard those stories so many times, man. And so Akeem Talib, you and your brother, they saying Akeem Talib shot him, his brother shot him, whoever shot him, whoever brought the gun, whoever didn't have the forethought to man, we need to calm this down. We need to what's the word I'm looking for? We need to de-escalate this situation before it gets to a point that it don't need to go, especially in front of these children. And that's another thing. As a coach for Little League, you always had those obnoxious parents out there. You always had those parents who was probably a high school star or something like that, but they didn't make it, and now they're trying to live vicariously through their child and push their child. We get it. We've seen them parents. I've dealt with those parents. I've had to have talks with those fathers and mothers because it was both. It wasn't just dads. The moms out there too, acting a fool. And you would have to have these conversations. Hey, look, Dad, I understand that you have this plan for your child and this and that. Your child ain't gonna be that. You can work with him off on your own time and try to develop him into that. But what we see as players and former players, he's not gonna be that. So we need you to back off of this kid and quit pressuring him because he's gonna end up hating sports because of you. We've had to have those conversations with these dads and these moms out here. And so where was the grown up at to de-escalate this situation? Because it sure wasn't the so-called pro players that was out there. Where was the man to say, hey, this don't need to go any further than this. It was a bad call, but we're not going to continue to show these children this, because they totally destroyed any form of inspiration, of admiration, in love for the game. Like I said, that action right there destroyed the love of the game for a whole lot of children. In their mind, when they think of NFL and they think of all those things that pretty much go with that title of NFL, it's going to sicken them to their stomach. And that was one of the worst things that I hated about the actions of these parents who would try to push too much and try to take it way too serious. It hurt my heart, man. It still to this day hurt my heart that these people are they're so selfish. It's a very selfish thing. They claim that they love their children. They go out and they spend all this money getting them all of the little extra stuff and the accessories to make them look like the stars. And they're forgetting the main thing that they need to teach their child, the self-control. They need to teach their child the respect, teaching their child to know when to do this, know when to listen to this, know when to ask a question. They forego all of that to try to push their child into a level or area where they could never meet themselves. That's the selfishness of it. And it gets very heated with these conversations because they're thinking in their mind, you're messing up my chance. Not their child's chance. You're messing up my chance. And that mindset right there is what created that whole entire situation with Akeem Talib. And to the coach that lost his life, Coach Hickman, rest in peace. Our condolences to the family, and most importantly, your son who had to witness you lose your life over something that was so minute and something that was so small that very well could have been dealt with easily had they had a mind of a man. But the mind of a man is becoming very, very few and far between nowadays, because we're putting it into the hands of people that we think have the mindset of a man. And these pro athletes, a lot of them don't even have it. So we can't give them the benefit of the doubt anymore because of their athletic ability. Time for that is out. We got to be on our P's and Q's, fellas. We got to dot those I's and cross those T's. And we can't slack up, and we can't give no room for this type of display in front of our children anymore. That's our responsibility as men, locally, internationally, globally, whatever. So, that's all I really had to say, man. But yeah, y'all go check out that story about Ray Caruth if you don't know about it, man, because that was crazy. That was right. That was the turn of athletes holding the responsibility of being a positive influence and a role model in the life of our children. That right there, that action by Ray Caruth, that was the turn of it right there. And that's where our foot had to go down and say, nah, we're not allowing this anymore. So shout out to all the athletes. Shout out to all the men, the local legends, the community pillars. Shout outs to y'all, man. We taking back this strength. We taking back this responsibility, and it's ours. Athletes, y'all can go ahead and just focus on what you're doing in your respective area. So this is your boy D-Mac, man. Y'all know what I say. Sticks and stones can break your bones, but the word can always heal you. I'm out.